You take a nap, you wake up, and the ringing is louder, more intrusive, maybe worse than it's been all day. Does that sound familiar? You're not imagining it, and you're not alone. About 1 in 3 people with tinnitus reports this exact thing. And of those people, it's almost always gets worse after waking up, not better. For years, nobody had a good explanation for this. Patients would describe it, and I'd be working with theories, not answers, but that's starting to change. Some genuinely interesting research has come out in the last 2 years that finally puts real science behind what you've been experiencing all along. I'm Dr. Layne Garrett, founder of Timpanogos Hearing and Tinnitus here in Utah. I've been treating tinnitus for over 20 years, and today I want to walk you through what we now know about why naps spike tinnitus, what's actually happening in your brain and body when it does, and what you can practically do about that.
If you're navigating hearing loss or struggling with ringing in your ears, then you've come to the right place. The All Ears Hearing and Tinnitus podcast is your go-to source for expert insights, real stories, and cutting-edge solutions in hearing health. We'll dive into the latest advancements in hearing healthcare, explore groundbreaking treatments for tinnitus, and offer practical tips for better hearing. Here to help you tune into a world of better hearing, here's your host from Timpanogos Hearing and Tinnitus, Dr. Layne Garrett.
Okay, let's start with the numbers because they're more striking than most people realize. A 2024 study published in Scientific Reports analyzed over 9,700 people from two very large tinnitus databases, the Tinnitus Hub Survey and the Tinnitus Research Initiative database. The question was simple: does napping affect your tinnitus? About 30% of respondents said yes, and of those, it skewed heavily towards making it worse. Roughly 3 times as many people reported tinnitus getting worse after a nap as reported getting better. That's not a small side effect. That's a consistent, reproducible phenomenon in a third of tinnitus patients. What made this study more interesting is that the people who had nap-related tinnitus changes also tended to have more variable tinnitus overall, more sensitive to stress, to poor sleep quality, and to physical triggers like jaw tension or neck position. If naps are a reliable trigger for you, it's telling you something about your auditory system and how it's wired right now, and potentially about what else might be going on. Now, here's where the research gets really interesting. Researchers actually brought 37 people in who reported tinnitus getting louder after naps to a sleep lab and monitored 6 different naps with full recordings, the same kind of monitoring that they use for diagnosing sleep disorders. Before I tell you what they found, let me ask you something. If your tinnitus gets louder after a nap, what do you think is causing it? Most people guess things like jaw tension, body position, or teeth grinding during sleep. The researchers thought that those things might be the culprits too, but that's not what the data showed. They ruled out body position, they ruled out teeth grinding, jaw tension, neck position. It's not the drivers that everybody had assumed. But for the nap spike pattern, but for those that the tinnitus got louder after a nap, what did matter was breathing. And that surprised a lot of people because it means the tinnitus getting louder may actually be tied to what's happening to your airway while you sleep. Snoring duration and the number of apnea events significantly correlated to how much your tinnitus got louder. Nap length also mattered. Longer nap, louder tinnitus. So here are the 3 mechanisms that research points to right now. First, sleep-disordered breathing. When you snore or even have mild apnea events during a nap, these are brief oxygen dips to your auditory system. The cochlea and auditory brainstem are sensitive to those changes. The researchers think a muscle called the tensor veli palatini, which helps regulate middle ear pressure, may be disrupted by snoring or airway obstruction. The result is temporary, but measurable changes in tinnitus perception are there. This is why treating sleep apnea sometimes directly reduces post-nap tinnitus. Second, what Oxford researchers have called local wakefulness. During normal sleep, the brain undergoes what's called global downscaling, slow wave activity that sweeps across the cortex and dials down the neural noise everywhere. But in people with tinnitus, the auditory cortex and associated brain regions may stay hyperactive even during sleep. They don't fully participate in the restorative process of sleep. So while you're asleep, your tinnitus circuitry never goes quiet. And when you wake up, it's already running hot. And then third, REM disruption. Research looking at sleep architecture in tinnitus patients found that people with significant nap-related tinnitus changes had less REM sleep compared to matched controls. REM sleep plays a key role in emotional regulation and how the nervous system processes stress. When it's fragmented, which is common when tinnitus or anxiety about tinnitus disrupts your sleep, You wake up without that restorative cycle completing. Your nervous system is more reactive, and a more reactive nervous system perceives tinnitus as more intrusive. These three mechanisms are not mutually exclusive. They likely interact, but together they explain what you're experiencing. It's not random, it's not in your head, and it's not just how tinnitus works. As you're listening here, you might already be recognizing your own patterns. For some people, it's snoring. For others, it's fragmented sleep. And for others, it's just that their tinnitus seems more reactive overall. Whatever it is for you, it's worth paying attention to, because patterns like this are actually useful clinical information. When patients tell me their tinnitus reliably gets louder after naps, my first question is, do they snore? Because undiagnosed or undertreated sleep apnea is more common in tinnitus patients than people realize. I had a patient, David. He was about 50 years old, he'd already retired, and he had moderate tinnitus that had been manageable for years. He started taking more naps after he retired and noticed his tinnitus was getting harder to cope with in the afternoons. He thought it was aging, but his evaluation flagged the post-nap pattern. His wife mentioned that he snored. We referred him for a sleep study, and they found moderate obstructive sleep apnea that had never been diagnosed and was completely untreated. Once he started CPAP therapy, the post-nap spikes reduced significantly. His tinnitus handicap inventory score dropped from 60s to the 30s in about 3 months. Better sleep, better oxygenation, better auditory recovery during sleep. Not every patient with post-nap increases in tinnitus has apnea, but this is exactly the kind of connection a thorough tinnitus evaluation is designed to surface. When someone just hands you a white noise machine and sends you home, this entire thread of the clinical picture goes completely untouched. Before we get into what to do, one thing this research does not mean is that naps are bad for tinnitus. For a lot of people, better sleep actually helps reduce tinnitus distress overall. What the research here is pointing to is that transition between sleep and wakefulness can temporarily change how the auditory system processes sound. The nap isn't the problem, the question is what's happening during it. So what to do with this information? First, track the pattern. If your tinnitus reliably gets louder after naps, start noting what varies when it does versus when it doesn't. How long was your nap? Did you wake up feeling rested or groggy? Does your partner say that you were snoring? This information is useful. Second, consider whether undiagnosed sleep apnea might be in the picture. The warning signs overlap significantly with tinnitus complaints: poor sleep quality, feeling unrested, daytime fatigue, morning headaches. If you snore or someone has noticed that you stop breathing while you sleep, that's worth a formal sleep evaluation. A home sleep test is often all that's needed, and it's really not a big deal to get one done. And third, think about nap length. The research found that longer naps correlated with bigger tinnitus spikes. Short naps, less than 20 minutes, are less likely to involve the deeper sleep stages where disruption has the most impact. If you're going to nap, keeping it short may help. And fourth, sound enrichment while you're napping. Some patients find that low-level background sound while they sleep, like using a fan or listening to nature sounds, or even using the hearing aid's tinnitus sound therapy feature if they have one, reduces how jarring the post-nap transition feels. It gives the brain something to process during that waking up window rather than just landing in silence. And lastly, this is the one I want to leave you with. Don't accept post-nap tinnitus spikes as just something you have to deal with. It's a signal. If tinnitus is reliably disrupting your sleep or spiking after sleep, that warrants a proper evaluation, not just of the tinnitus itself, but of your sleep health as part of the complete picture. So here's the bottom line. About 1 in 3 tinnitus patients experience this. The science now points to 3 overlapping mechanisms: sleep-disordered breathing, affecting auditory oxygenation, disrupted slow-wave activity that fails to quiet the hyperactive auditory cortex, and fragmented REM sleep that leaves the nervous system more reactive. None of that's inevitable, and none of it should just be dismissed of, that's just how tinnitus is. Short naps, sound enrichment during sleep, addressing sleep apnea if it's there, these aren't small tweaks. For some people, they're the difference between tinnitus that's manageable and tinnitus that's exhausting. If you want to learn more about proper tinnitus treatment care, I built a free online learning center that walks through the evidence-based options step by step. You can find a link in the description. And if you're here in northern Utah and want a proper tinnitus evaluation that actually looks at the whole picture, not just trying to cover up the sound, you can schedule an appointment in one of our clinics along the Wasatch Front. The link is in the description too. Thanks for watching.
A world of better hearing and relief from tinnitus is within reach, and we're here to help. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast right now and join us on the journey to clearer sound and a richer life. Thanks for listening to the All Ears Hearing and Tinnitus podcast with Dr. Layne Garrett. We'll see you next time.